Just a lot of bad stuff all rolled up into one. He had included a bunch of stuff I absolutely hated, like the fact that he still feels that women our age are past their prime and have cellulite. People who had considered themselves incels, involuntary celibates, but have since had sex. How do you feel looking back at your previous self? Oh God, high school me wore fedoras and believed my superior intellect and science-based social theories were too much for everyone. And that I was really a James Bond type with my knowledge of various fields. Turns out I was gay as duck, but so deep in the closet my zip code was in Narnia, not really that smart in anything but too ADHD to focus past basic knowledge of anything, and in a desperate need of a new wardrobe. I never really considered myself an incel at the time, mostly because I'd never heard the phrase, but I was very incelly in high school. I was the type of person who would hold a door open and then wonder why girls weren't falling into my lap. Turns out in high school I wasn't that attractive, and nice isn't a personality. I fell very much into Chad's and Stacy's frame of mind for a while. A lot of things changed really, but mostly I just grew up. It's a super childish view of things and just doesn't take into account that the people around you are, well, people. If someone held a door open for you, you wouldn't throw yourself at them. It's about maturity in relationships. But seriously, high school me was a proper cunt. I am so glad I had my teenage years in the late 80s and early 90s before the internet, let alone social media. Back then I couldn't get a date, let alone a girlfriend. I was, to be fair, hardly a catch, suffering from persistent depressive disorder, form an orderly queue ladies, and just generally having problems adapting. I was acknowledged to be a bit weird. I kind of accepted that it was my fault, which was bad for me short term but probably good, in the long term, for everyone concerned. Ultimately I had to sort myself out. But if I had had access to the sort of incel crap online around today, I fear I would have lapped it up with a spoon. A very large group of like-minded people telling me it isn't my fault. I can stop moping and start hating. Fantastic. I'm in. I would have been able to celebrate my status instead of reflecting on it and changing it. I'm sure I'd have been more than tempted. Social media has eroded, even destroyed, the concepts of privacy Gen X and before took for granted. For us to be an outsider, to be weird, was something you could do alone and grow out of, if you wanted to, of course. For the later millennials and beyond, even in quarantine, there is no alone, no solitude to reflect. Everything seems to be out there looking for likes and other forms of validation my addled mid-40s brain can't comprehend. Incels are a form of social validation that could not really have existed before social media. To get a network like that going would have been logistically and technically impossible on a scale beyond small outsider cliques in secondary schools. Now they are a movement. I somewhat pity incels because, but for 20 or so years, I could have been one of them. I was a being of pure hatred. I always thought it was someone else's fault. Even though I have had sex since that time, I think it's important to know that having sex isn't what vindicates you. Inceldom is a state of mind which requires strength and sometimes outside guidance to overcome. One of my friends essentially gave me a proverbial slap to the face on the subject and told me exactly what to do and how to become a better person. In conclusion, I look back with regret and sorrow, for all the people I hurt and made uncomfortable, because I know there are many. Edit, thanks so much for the positive response. I've received many questions about what my friend did to help me. My friend was and is someone I looked up to, so I suppose that is an influence, but basically the thing that I needed to understand was that the fact the girls who I was constantly being rejected by were just people living their best life. And me whining about it wouldn't change their preferences, so instead I worked on being happy without needing a GF and just letting it happen when it happens. There's always something to be said for talking to your friends, taking the time out of your day to listen to their troubles and offering advice. It really helped me, so I encourage you to do the same. You know, I don't know if this'll be buried, but I can actually share something valuable here. I did consider myself mostly an incel. Maybe, more of a nice guy, but to my core I believed that girls were only after the chads and douchebags. It was from the ages of 12 to 18, so a lot through my formative years. Here's the mindset: you've never had any awareness of the fact that girls don't indeed chase douchebags, because that's all you've ever looked for. Whenever you see a pretty girl who says she is in a relationship, you immediately assume that her boyfriend is a terrible person. Though, not because he is, but because you yourself assume that you would just be so much better off with her than any other person. You won't see your own flaws, so you'll assume the worst of the guy. The truth is, it comes down to major insecurity issues and a lack of any male relationships. If you don't have many different male friends, you're going to assume that only the cocky guys get the girls. In reality, they are displaying charisma and confidence, something that is very attractive. Everyone knows this. It's a lack of awareness. It's easier to say that you yourself are too short, too ugly, too untalented, etc. than to admit that you have a crappy personality with little to no charisma. You won't find a happy, charming incel. If I could have gone back to myself and say, here's the deal. Girls don't look for one particular thing in a dude. They don't just want a tall dude, or a wide-jawed dude. They want someone to be comfortable around. They don't want you to praise them as some higher being, they want to be treated with respect. But most importantly, they don't exist to have sex with you. They don't even exist to be your friend. They don't owe you anything, no one does. Just because you like them, doesn't mean they have to like you. Don't try to sleep with girls by being their friend. Be grateful that someone sees any quality in your person for them to want to be around you at all. Be grateful that someone wants to be your friend. You are shallow and you only care about looks. You saying it's about personality is all bullcrap. That's it. I was a young, angry kid. I'm glad I'm the man I am today. I've had a lot of confidence issues which went away as I grew older. I went through many edgy phases, and it took all of these mistakes to learn them. So I feel empathy for incels because they don't know any better. They don't know just how wrong they are, because admitting fault and self-improvement takes time and effort, blaming and hating girls does not. Instead of hating girls, my only wish is that I started on self-improvement sooner. I'm good friends with a guy who used to be a part of a popular incel website, and he used to post on Reddit. That's actually how we met. He is still growing a lot as a person. He was incredibly angry. He blamed being ugly for his failure with women, and nothing anyone said could convince him that it wasn't that. It was that he thought that he would only be happy with a really hot girl. We hung out once and were talking about how he wanted to approach women out with us. We were at a very nice place and the neighborhood had plenty of high-maintenance women, you know, the kind wearing expensive athleisure and who spent their entire lives dieting and doing spinning classes. Expensive hair and nails, all that. Women who were really dedicated to looking good. There were also the girls that worked there, and a few other customers about our age. He literally only saw the hot ladies. He was upset they'd never date anyone like him, someone who has pretty much no career ambition, doesn't want to conform by dressing or eating like they do, etc. And the average women in there just weren't women to him. It was really dehumanizing, because I saw him as an equal, and although he was sort of my friend, he didn't see me as human as he saw the hot ladies in Lululemon. He eventually saw a therapist. Actually, a few therapists. It was mostly to tell people he'd done it, but he stuck with it. Saw a few until one worked. And he started working on himself. We texted, emailed, etc. Hung out a few times, but honestly he wasn't working too hard on making friends, because he'd constantly say stuff that was belittling or mean just to hurt me or women in general, because he could. He also had spent too much time in black pill subreddits, because he brought it up on the one time I invited him out with my trivia team. A few months ago, before I had some major health issues and the pandemic kicked off, he got back in touch. He sent me a long email that was actually okay-ish. He had briefly dated a woman, they had slept together, and then he realized he still actually hated women and her too, because she wasn't living up to his fantasy. And that no one could. He realized he had a lot of conflicting ideas, that women shouldn't depend on men for money, but they also shouldn't be too career-focused, etc. Just, a lot of bad stuff all rolled up into one. He had included a bunch of stuff I absolutely hated, like the fact that he still feels that women our age are past their prime and have cellulite. I basically didn't have a ton of energy to reply other than to tell him I hoped he kept working at it and wasn't dating anyone else until he got over actively hating women. Edited to add, I definitely didn't think so many people would read and comment on this. First, the reason I reached out to him was that he described himself as around my age, living in my town, and I could see he was getting pretty radicalized. He admitted he was seeing the attraction in a lot of the stuff that was just straight up fascist interest in trad wives and white nationalism, supporting Christian Dominion type stuff despite being an atheist, etc. He also really internalized stuff from porn. He started watching it very early in life. Growing up he thought he'd be able to have women that looked like that, and they'd want sex that was like that, etc. That's what the email included, that he felt disappointed he wouldn't get the fantasy. He knew it was ducked up. He knew it was really bad, he just felt trapped into this gradual slide of his beliefs, and it was enabled by the internet, especially Reddit and YouTube.
Like and subscribe for more funny, interesting, and scary r/ask Reddit videos.